Okay, hello. Nobody. I'm a nobody. Are you nobody too? Nod to Emily Dickinson. Okay, it's going to be lecture 2 of ENG B76, and I'm going to be trying new things. Hold on a sec. The lighting is glary. Okay, now that's pretty dark. What I'm trying to do is I'm going to actually be showing you clips from movies with my other laptop, holding it up to the camera, so I find that, I think, easier than sharing the screen, but I have to keep going back and forth. And that means that the emphasis here is on will eventually be, I'll show you. Let's see, yeah. So I'll be doing something like, and that's worse. Okay, so I'm going to do this the other way, the better way. All right. So we'll get to that in a minute, but it's somewhat less glaring. Let's see if I do that. Okay, that's going to be better. Okay, so you've seen the notes to lecture 2. You've seen the prompt, the second prompt, which is looking. I'm going to do some scene analysis. That's why I've set up this other laptop, and you'll see me do 2 scenes, one each from It Happened One Night and The Graduate, with shout outs to Pretty Woman, and I will be seeing you tomorrow, Monday night, 7:30ish, as a kind of workshop tutorial. And you can talk about anything there, including your prompts, and I might do the same. I think one thing that hopefully will start to get more clear. I kind of, when I asked you to do the first prompt, I wished but it might have been too early. I said, see what influence money has on your song. And for many of your songs, money's not mentioned. So reasonably enough, you often said, well, there's no money. I really meant capitalism. The movement from negotiation to intimacy has to be guided by the genre of romance, because everything is infiltrated by transactional relationships. So capitalism is based on profit and debit. It's based on points of circulation and points of exchange. And this has put a lot of pressure on romance to be a commercial-free zone. So I can see the influence of capitalism on many of your songs, and I tried to hit reply and suggest a few, although it's true that the actual words of money weren't coming up. But what I did notice is the failures and the successes of the anti and pro romance, and I'd invite you to see this too, is which ones were able to move on from the transactional to the intimate. And intimacy is about vulnerability, not about profit debit. So many of the failed romances in your songs, they start, all relationships start transactionally, with possible exception of when you're born to your parents, where they see you from the outset as there's a mutual reciprocity. They're delighted with you, you're interested and delighted with them when you're not hungry or have a wet diaper, etc. But that relationship, it's a different melodrama is what often tries to diminish the transactionality of family life, so that career isn't allowed to destroy a family or an affair or things like that. And that's a very different genre. And we'll be talking about the interconnections, because in a way, all 3 genres in this class and all 3 genres in the next class, they do have a common denominator. They are all different ways of coping with the deprivations of modernity. They're all compensations for modernity that masquerade as resolutions to modernity. So the genre movie, at least during the arc of its narrative, will solve the problem. Romance will transcend the transactional, and It Happened One Night, The Graduate, and Pretty Woman. But if you look harder, you look between the lines, you can see that the resolution is quite fragile, quite temporary, quite orchestrated. The Claudette Colbert, her father is still a multimillionaire. We don't know, or we know they got along great when they were running away from things. How are they going to do when they're a sanctified couple? One reason romances end at marriage is that one of the kind of secret ingredients of romance, and this is a little paradoxical, is that you're falling in love and you're not married yet. Now, in the older movies, this revolves around sexual tension. Like, I love you, I want to get closer, I want to do more, but we're not married. I don't want to get pregnant. I don't want to be a father who has to pay support or whatever. But that changed with The Graduate. That changed with the sexual revolution. But there was still this pressure that how is romance, in the way romance solves modernity is it transcends it. In some ways, romance and melodrama are the two most spiritual genres because they look for something outside and up and beyond modernity. It's not typically identified as God, but the romance by definition is a sense that you have something with this person that's not of this world. I mean, it partakes of the world. Because the partners are usually, they show that they can get along in a secular material world, but that's not romance. Lots of people can do that. Lots of people partner to run a business or start a dog walking business or something. And a lot of romances will begin with a working partnership that then becomes romantic. So it still has to be distinct. And it has to both, particularly modern romance, the couple has to show that they are effective in the secular material world, but more importantly, they're effective in a way that doesn't lose touch with things that are more important than the secular material world. So being a good partner isn't enough. And there's that moment in The Graduate where Benjamin says, "Did he propose to you? What did he say?" And she says, "He said we'd make a good team." And Benjamin's like, "Oh my God, oh my God." And in a way that nails it, that Benjamin's parents were a good team. The Robinsons were a good team if you only define good teamsmanship as acquisition, keeping up with the Joneses. They're both highly successful upper middle class families. It's not as clear what Benjamin's parents feel about one another, but it's devastatingly clear that there's absolutely zero in between Mr. and Mrs. Robinson at this point. And so she got pregnant. They had to get married. They partnered well. If they were the subject of the romance, like the movie Knocked Up, where the guy, they have a one night stand and he's kind of not in her league, and then he wants to somehow do the right thing, and so they fall in love after she's impregnated, which just goes to show that sex, impregnation, all that stuff's important, but not to romance. Romance operates on its own principles, its own unique principles, and you don't fall in love with people because you impregnate them. You don't fall in love with them because you don't. It's if you fall in love with someone after you've been sexual partners, or even after you've conceived a child, it won't be the act of sex or the act of conception that made you fall in love. It'll have to be something else. And if there isn't anything else, it won't happen. Then you will just partner. And you can even partner to raise a child. You don't have to be in love. I mean, it helps, I guess, but you don't have to be in love to partner in child rearing. And parents who stay together, like the Robinsons, are very destructive to their children. So not getting divorced clearly doesn't help Elaine, who grows up in this loveless relationship with her parents, and as in so many cases, doesn't even know how much of an effect it's had on her. And Benjamin doesn't know how much the fact that he's a kind of produced commodity of his parents, that he's been thinged by them. I'm not saying they don't love him, but they have shaped him into this trophy for everyone else to see, and that's why they have this huge party. And what's bizarre about the huge party, it seems to me, is if if this is a party to celebrate Benjamin, where the hell are his friends? He grew up in this town, as far as I can tell. He and Elaine went to high school together. Not only do no friends of his come to his party, we don't see him with a friend the entire movie ever. It's bizarre. I mean, when you come back from university, you check in with your old high school friends, and yeah, I can imagine inviting a bunch of people that are more about your parents' friends, but to have the entire party where there's absolutely nobody there, that is there for any other reason than for his parents to say, look what amazing parents we are. No wonder he's hiding in his room saying, I just want things to be different. But in a way, Benjamin's got a long mountain to hike, because he for whatever reason, he's found it easier to be passive his whole life and do what's asked. And we still see that happening with that insane scuba diving scene. I mean, who the hell wears a scuba diving outfit in their backyard swimming pool? Unless it's for the dead to say, or else I'm out $200 and blah, blah, that's a pretty nifty gift. And there's that remarkable shot where he's literally pushing Benjamin's head underwater now, not that he's obviously going to literally drown him, but he's really anxious to show his neighbors that he's bought Benjamin something that allows him to breathe underwater. Well, that's not Benjamin's problem. He's already learned how to breathe underwater. He lives underwater. Clearly the equivalent of Benjamin is the little scuba diver guy in his aquarium who's blowing bubbles. And of course the aquarium, it foreshadows the swimming pool, which foreshadows the telephone booth where he calls Mrs. Robinson, which foreshadows the box of the room where they meet on a regular basis, which foreshadows the boxed glass church, which also looks like a gigantic aquarium, except this time it's full of the piranhas of his parents, Lane's parents, Carl Smith's parents, everybody that. And I love the scene where he's in the pool and the mother and the father are circling him in the pool, saying, "Why won't you ask Elaine out?" And he's like, "No, I'm never going to do it." And the mother finally says, "Don't go on like this. If he absolutely refuses," and Benjamin goes, "I do." She said, "Then we'll just have to have the Robinsons and Elaine over here." Now, if you look at her swim cap, it is the shape of a shark's fin. And it's clearly the director, Mike Nichols, has choreographed they are to swim in a circle. So he is on a raft being circled by sharks. And he's got nowhere to go but to just let himself plunge off the raft. And basically, the way that it's edited, he seems to virtually swim into another kind of lair, and that is the room where Mrs. Robinson is awaiting him, tense with fury, as he goes toward the clueless, proud father who just wants to just be so cool if Elaine and Benjamin hit it off, and because I'm already partners with your dad and we've all been friends forever, and this would just be the best. Anyway, so that was just kind of something to think about with The Graduate. I warned you there were a lot of boxes. Benjamin's boxed in. I mean, the opening shot, there's subway tile behind him, which are just lines of tiny little boxes. And we cut from Benjamin to a suitcase, and there's no difference. The suitcase is also being moved along by a people mover or a bag mover. It's not walking. And suitcases are empty except for what other people put in them. Suitcases have no identity of their own. They're a receptacle, and that's all Benjamin has been for his parents. He's a receptacle for their hopes and dreams, and also their vanity and their insecurities. That the better he seems to fit into the box of what a well-raised boy is, the more their own securities of the parents are assuaged. So they get anxious very fast when Benjamin seems to have drifted off course, to use another nautical term. Like they had factored in that he could lie around the pool for a couple of weeks before he went to graduate school. So there's no issue. But then there's obviously something wrong. And the mother wonders what he does with his nights. And the father says, you know, it's fine to take a break. You've done good work. Now you have to get off your ass. And, you know, you're overdue for our next expectation. And I know that especially now, this movie is more than 50 years old. Benjamin is like your demographic. He's just graduated from undergraduate. He doesn't seem a lot like the undergraduates I know now. Nor was he entirely like the undergraduates then. This movie was made in 1968. The campuses were rioting in the civil rights movement, in the Vietnam War protests, and you have to look hard in this movie to occasionally, just like the Depression is hidden in the background if it happened one night, the civil rights movement is hidden in the background of The Graduate. Tiny little moments, like when the crabby landlord is going up the landing, saying, "What are you doing? Why are you here?" I'm just, you know, not much. I'm not really a student. And he said, "I want to know who lives in my house," and it's all boys, of course. So it's not co-ed. And then he stops because he has a thought, and then he turns back and says, "You know, I'm one of those agitators. I won't stand for that. I won't stand for that." And Benjamin says very truthfully, no. Although I think later it seems like he is, because the woman comes to this room and screams, and you know, he looks like an outside agitator. Which is about as far from what he is as possible. He doesn't protest anything, and that contrast is deliberate. I mean, it's shocking that this movie, The Graduate, became the movie of the 60s, even the movie of the sexual revolution, because Benjamin he's not a hippie, not anything like a hippie. You know, you had Patty Hearst being kidnapped and committing armed robbery. You had protests everywhere. Chicago was burning at one point. Los Angeles was burning. There was a showdown at the Democratic Convention. You know, on the more bizarre side, there were the Charlie Manson murders. There was kind of an early war on drugs. LSD was literally invented at this point. Marijuana became readily available, although it was quite illegal back then. It's not that long ago. I mean, President Clinton, when he ran for office, famously was asked, because he's of Benjamin's generation, have you ever smoked marijuana? And then also famously he said, well, I did, but I didn't inhale. And that became, well, there weren't memes back then, but if there were, there would have been. I mean, that was, on the one hand, he knew it was probably ridiculous to say, I've never even tried it. Having gone through university in the 60s. So he tried to have it both ways. Like, you know, obviously it got passed around the dorm room, but I wasn't into it. I didn't inhale. And I remember that candidacy of Clinton. And there were people who were horrified that someone who had touched a joint might be president, because then they just get stoned and bombed Russia or something. That's how demonized pot was. I doubt Trump may well never have smoked marijuana. Probably would do him some good, but or I don't know. It couldn't be any crazier if he did mushrooms. So I don't guess we have to really worry about him. He's gone anyway, sort of. So yeah, so that's one moment that you see it, and the other moment, which is one of the scenes I'll analyze later tonight, is when he takes Elaine on that date from hell, which was designed to be a date from hell, because again, his way of wiggling out of standing for anything, of being anything other than an empty suitcase, is okay, I have to take Elaine out once because my parents insist. But this is easy. I've got it all figured out. I'll take Elaine out once because right now my parents are saying, you don't know if you don't like her or not. I haven't seen her since high school, which I still don't quite understand. Like, did they not, meet at Christmas parties after they'd both graduated? It's there's something a little odd about that. Because he went to school in the East, but he would have, like any university kid, he would have come back probably for Thanksgiving, certainly for Christmas, all of the summer. How have they not seen each other since high school? How does he have literally no friends? How is she not at the very least a friend Why didn't they go to the prom together? I mean, there's a strange gap, which shows that a genre is an engine. There's certain traction that the genre needs that doesn't always jive with common sense. It doesn't make sense that he hasn't seen her in high school, or that whatever connection they did or didn't have was at least explored when they were 10. Whether he stole one of her Barbie dolls, or they had a pool party, maybe they hated each other, then they loved each other, whatever. And none of that's there. The parents keep saying, "I've watched you grow up." Well, did Elaine watch him grow up? Did he watch Elaine grow up? It's almost like the parents each watched the other child grow up, and the two children never saw each other. But obviously, Elaine's a suitcase too, and she's being packed by her mother. Her father is kind of dropped out of crossing Mrs. Robinson, because it's not a pleasant thing to do, and it doesn't seem to affect anything. So he's a proud father. He's a solicitous father. We see him getting ready to drive Elaine back to Berkeley after the initial blow up. I don't think at that point he knows that his wife had been having an affair with Benjamin. And that scene is shot really interestingly. Like, you can tell there's serious alienation between the mother and the daughter. And, why wouldn't there be? I mean, the hook that the mother uses to begin her seduction of Benjamin is, "Would you like to see a portrait of my daughter?" And that's another brilliant scene, because if you watch, Nichols keeps superimposing the reflection of Mrs. Robinson right onto the portrait of her daughter. And among her many pathologies, alcoholism is the least of it, she seems very, very jealous of her daughter. And worried that she's not sexually attractive herself. And that's partly behind her rage, that, don't prefer this younger version of myself. And that, I don't think that becomes fully obvious until the wedding, and really to me, one of the most explosive moments in the movie, where Mrs. Robinson, who clearly takes a bit of a sadistic delight in the second, well, I'd say the last fourth of this movie, where everything's a chess game there, and she almost got checkmated. I mean, there's scenes of her looking like awful when she's forced to let her daughter know that she'd had an affair at all. She lies and minimizes it, and doesn't sound like an affair when she says, "I got drunk," tells her daughter, "I got drunk. Benjamin offered to help me to my room or drive me home, and he raped me in a hotel room." She can't know that's true. It's just she's desperate to believe it, because when they went to the Taft Hotel, everybody knew his fake name, and one woman knew his actual name. None of that could happen if Mrs. Robinson's story was true. I mean, they wouldn't know him at all. He'd have been once, and he would have raped a woman once. So Elaine has the evidence from the beginning that her mother's lying, but she's terrified, and it's hard to blame her. She doesn't want to believe that her mother could do that. And she is worried about her father, who seems kind of emotionally fragile. And his way of not falling apart is to conflict avoidance. At a scene where he does sit there to say, "Do you hate me? And why, we're civilized human beings. Why are you shouting? Unclench your fist. I can still see in the dark." He's terrified of facing himself or how he really feels. He doesn't seem to know what to make of Benjamin's insistence that it was just like shaking hands. It seems to me a rather odd comment to say, "Well, that doesn't say very much for my wife, does it?" Well, what is he talking about? Why is he insulted that his wife wasn't deemed sexier by this kid who was her lover? I don't even get it. There's no proof, but people have certainly suggested, is Mr. Robinson straight? And not in a homophobic way, but there were many marriages, especially at this time in the 50s and the 60s. The revolution for the gay population was not happening in the initial civil rights movement. Homosexuals, gays were still in the closet. But for fear of losing jobs and all kinds of discrimination. So there were a lot of marriages where well, probably on both sides, one or the other was gay, and what it meant to be gay wasn't very, there was no communal consensus about it. So there was legitimate confusion on the part of people who later felt I'm gay to not know if they were or not, because there was no community. And since it was much easier to not be gay, it was easy to kind of hope that it's a phase, or I don't know what this means, and so I'll get married and then it'll be all right. And of course, the result would be these very confused marriages in the 50s, where the woman wondered why there was zero sexual interest on the part of her husband, and the husband could have affairs, or the wife, with same-sex partners. This is something Todd Haynes explored in his movie, sort of based on 1950s sensibility, called Far From Heaven, which takes a look, kind of redoes Douglas Sirk's famous 1950s melodramas, particularly one called All This in Heaven Too. So Sirk does almost a remake, but and Rock Hudson was the star of these Sirk movies, and he was considered the epitome of masculinity. And of course, we know that he was gay. He had virtually a lifelong partner. And Haynes works that in by also having the perfect suburban couple, except that the husband is gay and has a gay lover. And all of that would have been scandal. And the way that the couple in The Graduate are already wired, they can't tolerate Benjamin, staying home an extra week between undergraduate and graduate. They're hardly going to be able to deal with the scandal of any kind of homosexual tension. So it's, Nichols the director didn't come out and say this, but there was many gay theorists have used The Graduate, and they've looked at many other movies, what's been called the celluloid closet. Like, how was gayness being depicted in Hollywood in the 20s, in the 30s, in the 40s? Cary Grant was married 3 times and also had affairs with men. And of course, the publicity people, watch all this like a hawk and not let it get out and kill stories. And there was even some complicity. It wasn't in the best interest of the gossip columnists to out these, because they would have been pariahs in Hollywood, and they never would have got another interview with anybody, and their ability to be a gossip columnist would have dried up. So they would gossip, but the gossip was contained, and affairs, heterosexual affairs, were considered, well, the studios were tried to control it, but it was less of an issue, and half the time the rumors wound up being true, and the divorce would happen, and the one that the person who was identified as the affair became the next partner. So the sort of the Brad Pitt, Jennifer Aniston, Angelina Jolie kind of triangle, that was tolerable to a degree. But so there's something like Breakfast at Tiffany's, based on a Truman Capote novel. It's pretty clear, it's about a man who's being kept by an older woman, and so Audrey Hepburn plays the attractive woman that the writer who's being kept by the older woman is enticed away. But it's clear that Capote is writing about a gay man who allows himself to be kept by an older gay man, while actually falling in love with a younger gay man. There are no women in this scenario, and it gets all turned around. And they did this with Tennessee Williams all the time too, in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. The Broadway version allowed the homosexuality to come through, but with Elizabeth Taylor and Paul Newman, the movie practically doesn't make any sense, because they keep suggesting that Paul Newman's impotent because he drinks too much. And in the Broadway play, it's obvious that he's gay and he's not attracted to Elizabeth Taylor, who's frantic to conceive so that she can inherit from Big Daddy, his very wealthy father, because his other brothers had 1 million kids and they're going to get all the money. So she is in fact the cat on the hot tin roof. And And their dark secret is that she slept with his best friend. The movie doesn't go on to add that that best friend was his lover. So they just leave it, again, it just seems kind of weird. And the best friend then committed suicide. So Paul Newman's wife seduces his best friend, and then that best friend commits suicide. That's pretty dramatic. And in the Broadway play, it makes sense because they were attracted to each other, and then somehow he got seduced by Newman's wife, and hate. It was already. I mean, one of the problems with homophobia is it tries to teach homosexuals to hate themselves, to view themselves with contempt, often under the guise of being kind. Like, I don't hate you, I just hate what you do. Or what you do is awful, but you're fine. And that kind of impossible split in the 50s and 60s would invite someone who was gay to want to respond to the kindness that, oh, I like you a lot. And so they would be taught to view their own desires as a horrible character defect, something incredibly shameful and embarrassing that would destroy them and their family if they didn't snap out of it somehow. Long aside, but not necessarily irrelevant, because even in 1968, Nichols would not have been able to hint. It's fine for Mrs. Robinson to be an alcoholic. It's fine for her to sleep with a young man who's 19, cheat on her husband, try and shove her daughter into the loveless marriage that will be the equivalent of hers and will break her daughter. That's all fine, but don't hint that Mr. Robinson might. Where is he? He didn't go to the party. Comes back from golf. I mean, it's almost a caricature of how a man leading a double life would act. They would go golfing, as in Brokeback Mountain, where you also had a man who was in love with another man, and so he went fishing on these regular camping trips. Heath Ledger's stunning performance, but that was a movie that featured the pain of trying to be straight, and both loving your other lover and hating your other lover because you love them. That famous "Why can't I quit you" is kind of heartbreaking in Brokeback Mountain, because it begs the question of, like, why you have to quit him. I mean, yes, he is married now, and it's going to be difficult for Michelle Williams' wife, but the alternative's not better. I mean, there's so much dysfunction. So anyway, I want to review a little bit based on, let me just sort of bring up my other laptop here. Some of the basics, which are, now the purpose of my notes in lecture 2, in lecture 3 we'll have some scene analysis. I didn't have scene analysis in 2 because I was still trying to set the table of what's the relationship between genres, and then romance in particular, and what's the interrelationship among the three, and then there's 3 more if you take B77. So it's a juggling act. I've got 6 balls in the air, right? Really mostly 3, although I'll still be gesturing to film noir and the Western and others from time to time, because it's rhizomatic. I mean, as a term you may know from my other classes, these genres are all, they look like they're separate, but they have the same root, which is, how do we offer a compensation for modernity that looks like a resolution, and not just a compensation. Like the superhero movies in many ways aren't as satisfying, because they don't even pretend that they're a resolution to modernity. Most of us don't expect to get superpowers or be bit by a radioactive spider, but all of us can and possibly will fall in love, or be challenged in our career ethics like a noir, or be challenged in our keeping our family together, as in a melodrama, and so on. So these classic genres, the superhero movie is almost I mean, you can argue it's a separate genre, and it is, but it's not about the everyday. It borrows from the Western a fair amount because you have all the heroics, And there's a degree of sacrifice, but not much family. These superheroes don't really go in for family. Not much career issues. Their career is to be super. So, I mean, Batman and those earlier ones, Batman in particular, it still has some grit. Batman's basically a film noir, and certainly the way that Chris Nolan directed it, and the stunning depiction of the Joker by Heath Ledger, that got into, and even the more recent Phoenix, Joaquin Phoenix's prequel of the Joker. The Joker is incredibly modern, if you allegory, and the supervillains in Batman. I mean, you can be cartoonish about it. Schwarzenegger was Mr. Iceman or something in a very forgettable way. There was a TV show where they cartooned it up, but if you mine it, most of the psychotic bad guys in all the superhero movies have been made psychotic by modernity, by capitalism. So Bane would be another. There's something about, he's a socio-economic political allegory, and not just a crazy person. So the underlying premise of the class is that popular movies and modern subjectivity are mutually constituted from the beginning of cinema and modernity through to the present. And by mutually constitutive, I mean it was not the case that there was first the city and modern economics and hourly wages and depressions and recessions, and then the movies depicted that. It's impossible to tell. It's a Mobius strip. Each mutually constituted the others. So movies contrived a more ordered sense of the modern city and modern life in the city, because through editing you can make a city look coherent in a way that it isn't. But we learn to imagine the city as coherent through the editing process that we see in the movies, because we mimic the editing process of movies, and movies mimics the editing process of keeping our identity coherent. And it's really impossible to tell where one begins and the other ends, and it's been impossible for over 100 years. At this point, you can't tell the dancer from the dance as far as subjectivity, and both employ editing. With people, we call it memory, and with movies, we call it shifting from a close-up to a zoom shot. But what is it that causes the background to become foreground? Which part of your background becomes the foreground? Because if you're standing next to someone else in a modern city and looking at the exact same thing, your background and foreground will not be the same as the person standing next to you. And that's why it can be fun and interesting to walk in the city with someone, because you wind up saying, oh my God, look at that billboard. Oh wow, look at these Gucci purses in the window. Oh, look what the pigeon is doing. You can't notice everything. The person you're walking with can't notice everything. So half the walk in a city is pointing out what the other was missing, while they were seeing the thing they're pointing out to you that you missed while you watch looking at the thing. And it's why it can be kind of romantic in a weird way. There's so many. Pretty Woman has some of the most famous. People fall in love walking through the city talking about it. Because they can do it in a flirtatious way. It's a way to exchange values. What you notice, why you notice it, whether the person you're with notices it or not becomes important. You can often tell how compatible you are with someone by just taking a walk through the city. If you're bored, then you might want to think about whether you guys have enough points of connection. Because somehow what's background and foreground for them and what's background and foreground for you doesn't mesh. I mean, it's not a judgment. There's nothing wrong with either one of the people who might do that, and they might meet somebody else. I mean, somehow they got to get a logarithm onto Tinder where you can take a walk through the city before you swipe left or swipe right. It would be a much better dating app. Because otherwise you're just left with the face shot and a lot of bragging that has very little to do with how your subjectivity will be generated. Because in the same way that movies and subjectivity, the movies also think of the movies as a third term, almost a transcendent term between two subjects. So if you go on a date to a romantic movie, there's you and your relationship to the movie, then there's whoever you went with and their relationship to the movie, and in a way the movie becomes similar to taking a walk in the city. And you can take a walk in the city to go to a movie in the city, and you can take a walk home from the movie after the city, and you can even walk through the mall on your way to the movie, and you're going to be constantly working this triad of what's your foreground background, what's my foreground background. There's no judgment here. There's nothing, no one's foreground background dynamic is right or wrong, better or worse. It's what it is. And which is why you can have couples that appear early in romance movies where it seems a no-brainer that they have zero compatibility. I mean, look at the way that Peter and Ellie meet. And it happened one night. She takes the seat he's arguing about. He says that's mine. She says, the driver, because she's used to being catered to by authority, she ignores him. And now are these seats reserved? And he's like, no. And he's happy because he already had it out with Peter over the newspapers. And then Peter says, driver. And he's like, what? He said, these seats are built for two, aren't they? And he's like, maybe they are, maybe they're not. And then he sits down next to a very annoyed Ellie saying, well, this is a maybe you are. Now see, Ellie's never in a public space. She's I don't know if she's been in a train or bus station before. She's never been on a bus. And part of her feels like she can negotiate it with the implication of her father's wealth. And but it doesn't work. Like just as when she's going to the Winchester, Windsor Arms for my tea or something. And he's like, you'll never get back in time. And he's not being a jerk. He's like, did you just say that? I don't get it. And she's like, oh, I will. He'll wait for me. And he doesn't even know what to say. And she gets up and says, oh, driver, I'll be about 20 minutes late. So wait for me, please. And he goes, oh, yeah, which seems to be all he knows how to say. And she turns back and says, yes. The way a wealthy person would upbraid a slightly dim servant. And she's genuinely astonished when she comes back and the bus is gone. And so it doesn't even occur to her to check and make sure she has her ticket when she leaves. Even if she'd seen the ticket on her seat, it would be like leaving a ticket in the back of a chauffeured limo that your father has hired. I mean, you're not going to lose what you put in the seat. So he rescues her in that moment, and he doesn't have much respect for her ability, to get by. He says, I can take care of myself. He says, well, you're doing a pretty lousy job of it. Here's your ticket. But he's also, he's lacking in ways he doesn't know, and she's lacking in ways that she doesn't know. And this is basic to the romantic couple, if not all of us. It is very hard to see our own lack. It's easy to see what other people lack. Impossible to point it out to them, but easy to see. And the same goes for them with us. And what's special about romance is that there is something attractive to the other person in how you struggle with your lack. And there's something attractive in the other person with how they struggle with their lack. And you could even argue that the falling in love process, particularly in It Happened One Night, is he starts to realize, how authentic she is. I mean, she has her upbringing. She doesn't know what's going on. She actually is resourceful and intelligent and compassionate. She's a fish out of water, in a way. But it takes him quite a while to see that she's not actually a spoiled brat, and that she has no idea how to do it, but she's really determined to become self-sufficient, but as he already thinks he is. And at first, it seems obvious to him that he's self-sufficient and she isn't. But his self-sufficiency is also very guarded. He's really lonely. You don't even realize it until he finally shares his vague fantasy of if he could ever find the girl. But it's not much of a mystery why he hasn't found this girl who wants to frolic in the surf. I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with actually meeting anyone. And had she not already been in love with all of the things he's already shown her, she would have zero interest in some weird Tahiti fantasy. But she reads it allegorically, like, I love you, I want you to be in love with me. And he said, well, I'd be in love with a woman who would jump around in the surf with me. And she goes, okay, I want to jump around in the surf with you. And he gets it in a way, and then sends her back to her bed immediately, because he's like, okay, if you're the one, then I got to, but I still have to, I still want to be the man here. I want to have money, and I want to do the proposing. And he's not as capable as he insists. I mean, the hitchhiking scene, one of the more famous scenes, and certainly not in all of Hollywood, and certainly in Hollywood romance, is he goes on and on mansplaining. That word didn't exist now, but it seems to me that Clark Gable invented it. He's got to explain the hell out of everything to her, like she's 5, how to dunk donuts, and of course how to take off his shirt and his pants. Like, why is that of interest to her exactly? That is, by the way, the first scene in a Hollywood movie where a man is not wearing a shirt, and it literally devastated the t-shirt market. All the guys, none of the guys wanted to wear t-shirts after they saw Clark Gable in that scene. He's also the first guy to swear, as in Gone with the Wind, where he says, "Frankly, Scarlett, I don't give a damn." And that shocked the world somewhat. Getting distracted here. I was going to tell you that Hitchcock's the first person who ever filmed a flushing toilet in Psycho, but you may not, unless we're playing Trivial Pursuits. There are reasons to talk about these first, but not right now. So they contrive a more ordered sense of, and notice how much of this is about gears meshing, so that the lack you don't realize is activated by this other person, and their lack is activated by you. And at first that actually makes you less compatible, because it's vulnerable. And this is where you either move toward intimacy or you refuse to see the person ever again, because it's way too exposing. It's way too exposing to feel a lack emerging from you that you've probably spent a good bit of your life denying. And that same thing is happening to them. And it's one of the initial feelings is anxiety and fear, not I'm in love. You're in love when you realize that they love you despite your lack. And then they're astonished. Like, one of the reasons you haven't looked at your lack is you feel that lack is unlovable, that it's the foul rag and bone shop of your heart. And who would be interested in you if they had to come through the separate entrance through the foul rag and bone shop of your heart? Like, they'd be like, ew, it's gross, this place is a mess, I'm out of here. The reality is that people fall in love with the rag and bone shop of your heart, but not necessarily if you show it right away. And there are other people who actually won't care about it. And you might think that they're better lovers because they don't care about your rag and bone shop, but they're actually less, they're indifferent lovers. Then they're interested in the sex, or they're interested in the money, or if they're not interested in your rag and bone shop, they're not interested in you. But you're not interested in your rag and bone shop, or at least you don't think you are, because it's a scary place to go, even though Yeats tells us it's where all the ladders start, in the foul rag and bone shop of your heart. That's the only place love can happen. And it's a place of vulnerability and intimacy. And it's not pretty. That's the weird thing. Love is, and romance is beautiful, but in a way it takes place in a rag and bone shop, where it doesn't happen at all. That's what makes it unique. You can't fall in love by yourself. You can only fall in love with another person. And this thing we call in love is unique among all the emotions, because it is something that is not in you and it's not in the other person. It's only something that is generated like a movie by the relationship. So when you're in love, your marriage becomes a movie projector, and the movie that's playing on the screen is projected from the quality of your relationship. And you can see the Robinsons movie. There is no movie. The Braddocks, it's kind of a movie, but it's super boring, and it's just about buying things. So what kind of movie do you and your partner project onto the wall that is neither in you nor them, but it is inextricable from the shared subjectivity? So all of this implements for the subject what feels like a manageable way to organize and keep track of emotions and thoughts, priorities and values, background and foreground. So the interplay between the poles of these two organizing principles form a network of modern subjectivity, a matrix, if you will. We're talking about the sci-fi later. Science fiction is particularly interested in how reality is generated or not. But each of these genres has an interest in how reality is generated. They're just not trying to generate the same realities. So science fiction is trying to generate a reality where technology will resolve the problems of modernity. It's both the danger and the solution to modern deprivations. So let me see. The result of watching and learning from rituals enacted by the cinematic genre it comes about because it appeals to unexamined myths of what constitutes happiness and contentment. So it appeals to myths of happiness without calling attention to them, because myths only work well when they are assumed and not analyzed, because they don't hold up. They're felt as foundational because we don't look at them too closely. And cultural revolution occurs when unassumed myths of a culture crack. Right now, they're the QAnon people. They're doing one of two things. Their foundation has cracked. They had a foundation that Trump was a kind of Christ who, or Godot, who had come and all would follow. And there was a deep, dark plot. Democrats trading babies for sex out of pizza parlors. Doesn't matter how insane it is. In fact, it's important that it kind of be unprovable, because the weird thing about conspiracy theories is one of their only proof that they exist is that there's no proof that they don't, and you can't prove a negative. So that's why it's so hard to deprogram people who go into cults, is they've already been told that you'll not find any evidence for what I'm talking about because it's true. It's so true that all the evidence is hidden. It's kind of ingenious, but it's also something that you tend to gravitate toward when you're aimless and directionless. I could see Benjamin joining a cult at his university if things had gone the wrong way. He's so empty, and so he's such a suitcase that you could stuff him full of QAnon conspiracy theory, or you can stuff him full of all the things he has to do at university, none of which he feels any connection to. He's captain of the track team, he's captain of the on and on, whatever she's reading. None of those things matter to him. He didn't feel them. He's a fish, he's a goldfish in a bowl that gets brought out by his parents so people can feed him. He can't feed himself. He can't leave the bowl. That's why it's so important in that final scene that the church is an aquarium, but in a final reversal, he locks the adults into the fish bowl and runs away. Now they can't get out. Now they're the fish looking out, and that's why they're so excited. But the ending of The Graduate is kind of remarkable, because they do jump into a bus, which might recall it happened one night, since they're also we have the woman running away from a marriage, which is also the ending of It Happened One Night. But they're also it's a little disconcerting that they jump back into a bus with a big glass window. And they look out the back window, and they're super excited to see the church receding. They've gotten away. But then there's that remarkable counter shot where they see all the tired people who are like, what the hell just happened? And then Nichols does something, I think, absolutely brilliant in a movie that's full of brilliant directorial techniques. He holds the final shot forever. And that's not the way a romance is supposed to end. You end the romance where they're both laughing and thrilled, and he will not cut. And apparently in the filming of that, he didn't tell them. And so they didn't know what they were supposed to be doing. And you can see it on the face of the actors in a way. Like, do I laugh again? Do I smile? They kind of get tired. And it's a brilliant way for Nichols to say, okay, I've taken you through a romantic movie in a very weird way. I've taken you through meaningless sex, and I've gotten to that sweet spot that everyone likes. Here is the hyper complementarity of the perfect couple, and they will rise above all things, or will they? Usually you have to walk out of the theater and be halfway home before you're like, wait, is that really going to work out? Is a prostitute going to marry a multi-millionaire financier? And are they really going to build boats, which nobody does anymore as a family business. Is any of that actually going to happen? And that's certainly not what you're thinking when he's being driven by the limousine and he's got the bouquet, and the opera song is Verdi is going on, and she's at the top of the tower and he's the prince, and it's like, oh my lord. And he's like, well, what does she do after the prince saves her? And she says she saves him right back, which is exactly what I've been talking about for the last half hour. They each have a lack. He will save her lack. She will save him his lack. All his life he has been sort of addicted to ritualistically destroying the father he hates by buying companies from these old men, which is what we see him doing, and then destroying the company in front of their eyes, and he's emotionless. And she has been told that she is, as her mother put it, a bum magnet, and essentially deep down she's worthless. And she says at one point, it's easier to believe the bad things that people say about you than the good things. So the best she can do with feeling unlovable is like, well, let's see if I can make some money. I'm not going to be loved anyway, so I'll charge for sex, and then I'll just bide my time and see if I can find a way out. Love is not going to be my way out because I'm unlovable. And I mean, so Pretty Woman, to a large degree, doesn't actually make sense literally. But the thing about genres is they make sense emotionally. And same with melodrama. I mean, melodrama kind of has a bad reputation sometimes of being like ridiculously contrived. And some of them are. But the great melodramas, even if the plot facts seem to have been pushed around a little, who cares? The purpose of genre movies is feelings. It's not, you're not going to philosophy class. This isn't a math class. This isn't an exercise in rationality. Modernity does that all the time. Algorithms. I mean, you want rationality, then Google stuff. If you want feelings, go to the movies. Cinema is the Google of your emotional world, where you can look up, why do I feel so anxious? Why am I afraid? Why am I furious? Try typing "why am I furious" into the Google search engine. The hell is it? No, it'll give you 50 million responses, but none of them are worth anything. So love is an emotional algorithm that doesn't work like an algorithm. We're really not very good at all at negotiating our feelings, because there's nothing in modernity that rewards that. Modernity is about acquisition, and ads tap into your feelings all the time, but only for one reason: to sell you stuff that they claim will complete your lack, and none of them will. But we're so susceptible to that because we're all walking around with an unidentified lack that's unacknowledged by the myths of modernity. And it can screw up romance too. When you look at your songs, it's very easy for attraction to get commodified. And you don't mean to, but you use your partner like a commodity. Like, you don't care what went into the making of them. You just want the effect they give you. And they might feel the same way. And then you both say that's love. But if that's love, so is a trip to the Eaton Center. And it's not. Thank goodness it's not. But it's easily misrecognized as love. So in addition to you need to move from negotiation through vulnerability to intimacy, and it's not monetizable. You're also moving away from the transactional to the conversational, the improvisational, I should probably say. And we see that in It Happened One Night. They are calculating all the time. I'll help you get back if you let me have the story. You're on a budget now. You don't have enough money to get back. Everything's a transaction. We're both in. I got one room for us because we can't afford 2 rooms. I just got enough that don't give a damn about you. You're just a story to me. And she's like, you're just a way for me to get back to New York. That's fine. Put up the blanket. Go to bed. And I think they both mean it. I actually don't think he's not that shapely guy that we saw on the bus, this creepy married guy who just wants to see if he can do a quick one-night stand. I don't know what he wants, but in fact, Peter he's not trying to seduce her. And we see with Mrs. Robinson what predatory, using someone to fill a bottomless void. I mean, she just you can tell she has brief moments of satisfaction that this young man who's a virgin is infatuated with unlimited sex, sort of besotted by it initially, and she has no interest in anything other than him fulfilling a kind of hollow vanity. And it's also a way for her to quietly express her contempt for her husband, her life, suburbia. When the father travels to Berkeley and is waiting in the dorm room and says, "Why did you do it? Do you hate me?" A better question would be, just how much does your wife hate you? And how much does your wife hate your daughter? Which is really startling when the daughter rounds on her mother just before they're going to run out of the church, and the mother says, "It's too late," which is, she'd already said that to the husband. But the daughter says, "Not for me." And that's a brilliant retort, meaning, because really what the daughter's saying is, yeah, it is for you. I mean, that's why you're like this. You gave up your life. You married someone for the wrong reasons. You felt sorry for yourself about it. You hated him for it. You drank all the time and did nothing else except stew and be a victim. And then you did to Benjamin what you felt had been done to you. You just squashed his innocence, the way presumably Mrs. Robinson's innocence got squashed. But that's one way to deal with trauma you refuse to face, is you visit it on someone else and then you watch them. And in her case, it's gone to the sadistic. Like, she is watching Benjamin, using an aquarium metaphor, wriggle on a hook in agony. And part of it, if she were honest, must remind her of a way she felt before she became a jaded alcoholic. And unfortunately, because it is too late for her, she gets a certain perverted joy out of looking at his agony. And she'll watch her daughter go through agony. I mean, this guy may think they're a good team, but he's referred to as the makeout king, and you don't get the feeling he's in love with her, or even someone particularly prone to being faithful, or even not interested in the romance, other than like, come to the corporate meeting and be beautiful because I'm hoping to get a promotion. And if she were into that, and some couples are, certain power couples, that's the deal. I mean, that's actually, they're attracted to their ability to work a room, and that can sort of work as long as both people have that idea. But as in that devastating scene in The Godfather, where Pacino falls in love with Diane Keaton, and then he takes over the family business, and he orders the hit on his brother-in-law. Sorry, spoilers, but the movie's been around for a while. And at the very end of the movie, his wife says, "Did you do that? Did you order that hit?" And he said, "No. Now don't ever ask me about my family business again." And then there's a slow zoom backwards as the hallway gets longer and longer, and the door shuts. And that's the end of their marriage as something with any kind of emotional intimacy. And you see it in the next Godfather movie. She's struggling with it, trying to find her bearings. So, how long have I been rambling? I don't know, but long enough to move toward a couple scene analysis before I let you go. Let me briefly give a little contrast here. I've been working on the lecture notes to the third class. If melodrama appears to resolve supposed problems by presenting the family as a value-filled oasis amidst the wasteland of capitalist avarice, and if horror resolves it by objectifying it in a monstrous form that can then be destroyed, then romance, quote, resolves it by floating above it, the way a Wizard of Oz's balloon lifts off from Oz and somehow will find Kansas. All the cliches about love making you feel lighter than air or no care in the world hint at what a likely vehicle for transcendence true love might be. And make no mistake, Hollywood romance is not about having a crush or a fling any more than it's about settling or playing it safe, or having a torrid one-night stand. It's about true love, finding the person who completes you in a way you didn't know you were incomplete, your better half, for better or for worse, until death do you part. True love, as configured by the Hollywood romance, is commercial free. It is not only priceless, It is non-substitutable, unique, and irreplaceable, all things which the material objects in commodity culture are not. They're all replaceable, they're all substitutable, they're all mass-produced, none of them are unique. As such, it is beyond the ceaselessly competitive relativism of the commodity marketplace, where most systems in modernity work on the principles of deferral of meaning, of gratification, of significance. True love occupies the place suggested by the notion of a transcendental signifier, a signifier that serves as the signifier for all other signifiers. That's what a diamond ring is also attempting to suggest. This is the heart, all other elements are softer than a diamond. There's nothing more durable than a diamond. There's nothing more durable than our relationship. Our relationship is the master word that makes all other words have meaning. And being in love can feel like that. Like you walk down the same street and it's like, I feel like I've never seen these houses before. I've never seen that little bird sitting on the fire hydrant. I've never experienced what the air smells like. Have I even been alive? That may or may not last all the time, but it does suggest that, as long as the other person is feeling something like it, because unfortunately you can provoke that response in yourself by filling in the gaps of a lover who's not as attentive as you've made them seem to be to you. Hence that self-help book. He's just not that into you, or she's just not that into you. There's no gender specificity here. One has to be careful that what looks like the seamless quality of the other person's affection for you has not been papered over by you, and so that you've explained lapses in phone calls and lateness and so on, that all had, they really were all unavoidable, and therefore do not have to be seen as quote unquote red flags. And it's a cliche for someone coming out of a relationship that has failed to say, how did I not see all the red flags? Well, that's virtually the nature of a failed romance. And what you're going to have to figure out is why. You've asked the right question. Why didn't you see the red flags? Because what emerges from the background is not the same. Why didn't these red flags emerge from the background? Now they're all you can see. And earlier in the relationship, they were the only thing you couldn't see. So how did that happen? And one way that cinema can literally play with this background foreground, they do it with deep focus. There are some great moments in The Graduate where the person in the front is out of focus. Like there's a scene where he runs up the stairs in the rain knowing the mother's going to follow. He's got like 5 seconds to tell her, by the way, that older woman I had the affair with was your mother. He's in his desperation, he thinks maybe he can salvage this if he at least tells her first. And then at first she's just laughing, and then her face slowly gets serious, and she finally says, Benjamin, what are you trying to tell me? And her face goes out of focus, and then the background comes into focus, and it's her mother standing there soaking wet and looking like hell. And Benjamin's eyes flick past her to the mother, and this is a very complicated counter shot, because she sees him looking somewhere else, and as is natural, she turns around to see what he's looking at, and then she sees the face of her mother, and then she turns back and sees his face, and now suddenly she's looking back and forth between Benjamin and her mother, and nothing is said, except she says, oh my God, no, and then get out, get out, get out. And then you have that long backing zoom shot away from Mrs. Robbins, who frankly looks like she's in an institution. The way that shot, she looks like she's in a straitjacket in an all-white room, and it's a searing moment where Mike Nichols gives us the visual equivalent of her psychological state. Originally, this was called German Expressionism, and it was begun with movies like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, where the scene depicts a mental state, and so the room is twisted, or the windows are cracked, and nothing's realistic in the scene except that it's a depiction of psychological state. So the unreality of the room is necessary to give a visual equivalent to the invisible psychological state. this will happen in film noir to a lesser extent. It happens in horror movies all the time, but in film noir, it's done a lot with lighting, where the shadow will be falling across the face of a man who's falling deeper and deeper into a moral dilemma that they're failing to grasp. Okay, all right, I got to get to a scene just to see if my crazy system will work. So I talk about the ideology of the chance encounter. That's important in modernity because these days we don't have any established ways to meet anybody. We bump into them, we swipe left or right, we have all these sort of lottery systems, which may or may not, how often do you win the lottery when you buy a ticket? Not very often, but you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. So we buy tickets, we don't expect a whole lot. And which is why we have this ideology that one of those lottery tickets is going to correspond to millions of dollars, emotionally speaking, because it's not supposed to be about money at all. So I'm trying to find the scene I want to look at. Yeah, okay. This is kind of it. Now is my volume is up. Let's see what happens. All right, now here's the tricky part. I'm going to show it to you. So I want to look at the scene where, quote unquote, where Ellie and Peter first, quote unquote, meet. Now, not surprisingly, the first time they meet, they don't notice each other. And that's not untypical for romance, because right so far this has been parallel stories. First, we got Ellie's story on the yacht, and we got a sense of her. Then we got his story in the telephone booth, and we got a sense of him. So they both had backstory. So now their paths are going to cross. But the way their paths cross is not because they sought each other out. He's finishing his argument with the bus conductor, and in the midst of it, without saying a word, here, let me take this around. Okay, so I gotta go full screen. You will see. So, so here's the scene. He's arguing with the bus driver, and now I'm gonna reach around and try to hit play. And I'm gonna run through the scene for a little bit. Hold on.
Served.
Nah, first come, first served.
Thank you.
Hey, driver, these seats accommodate two people, don't they? Well, maybe they do and maybe they don't. Thank you. Move over. This is a maybe they do. If you'd ask me real nice, I might put that bag up there for you. Next time you drop in, bring your folks.
Okay. So part of what I want to show you there is how, in a way, that scene is a miniature of the full arc of their relationship, because it begins with indifference. It begins actually with not even knowing that they each exist, and the only reason they speak is transactional. Just before this, what I showed you, he says, excuse me, but that upon which you sit is mine, meaning the seat, but there's a slight flirt, double entendre there, that she's shapely or something. And then she's like, driver, are these seats reserved? So they're playing a transactional game. It's a power game, and it's about tickets, it's about money, it's about property, it's about what has her ticket bought. And of course, the thing about public transportation or anything public, you buy tickets to it, but it's still shared space. So this meeting place is kind of important because, first of all, I can't think of the occasion where he would ever meet her. Normally, she'd be in her estate or wherever she might be. I mean, he kind of thinks she's Ivanka Trump, and but she isn't. Ivanka Trump really is Ivanka Trump, but transactional to the core, like her dad. But she's not. But on the other hand, her whole life she's been in private space that where the transactions are controlled by her father, like on the yacht. Obviously, all the men who work on that boat work for the father. He tells them to go give her food. They can't. They're not her father. So he goes in to do it himself, and they're afraid of her because she. I mean, they don't actually work for her, but because they work for her father, they have to be concerned about how she treats them. So that's the world she's used to. Everything's a transaction, and she's not even used to negotiating. We go from transaction to negotiation. He's like, first he's like, that's my seat. I put up a stiff fight for it. So his first argument to her is, by rights, that's my seat because I fought for it. And she's like, what's that have to do with me? I'm sitting in it, and you're not. So she rejects his first argument as to how he earned the seat. He doesn't say I earned the seat with my ticket. He says I earned the seat by throwing the newspapers out the window and doing this whole thing you didn't even see, but just take my word for it. I earned that seat. She's like, what does earning have to do with it? Driver, are these seats reserved? Did you pay extra? This is not a first class seat. He's like, no. But then she gets caught in her own logic, and he rather cleverly says, are they for one or two people? So at first she seems to win out because the seats aren't reserved. But then that traps her, because if they're not reserved for him, they're not reserved for her. So this is her first lesson in democratic economics. First come, first served. It's not a world that she knows. And so she resents it. So then he comes up with a new kind of transaction, which is not strictly monetary. He says, if you ask me really nicely, I might put your bag up there for you. Now, granted, he baits the request. If you ask me really nice. He doesn't say, if you'd like, I'll put your, I mean, there's an edge to the way he's trying to get her off her high horse in his mind. And so she's offended and determined to be self-sufficient. So she stands up to put the bag there herself. Now, she knows nothing about buses, so she would not know that when a bus starts, like a subway, you need to be holding on to something, and if you have no clue, you're going to actually fall over. So, of course, she falls over. She sits in his lap. Now, what's interesting about this is it's a full contact. Obviously, it's not sexual, although if he were that creepy Mr. Shapley, he would sexualize it. Shapley would. He'd just giggle and say something, stupid. He makes a quip, but he just says, next time you drop in, bring your family. So he doesn't sexualize it. And if you look at that scene closely, and it's hard the way I just did it, watch her face, because it's what we would call a medium shot. So it's not a close-up yet. You wouldn't want to do close-ups in this scene because close-ups imply intimacy, and it would be too soon. Later, the close-ups will get tighter and tighter as the relationship becomes more and more intimate. But now you can only work with medium shots. So that means, but what you'll notice, her face goes from rejection to disapproval to just a flash of what looks like amusement. It was kind of funny, and she does actually have a sense of humor, as we will see later. And I think it's the first time she sees it. He's an annoying person, some public person, not like any man she's ever met before, which is too bad, because King Wesley is a total simp, and just because he is some kind of playboy who has maybe some money and able to at least hang out with those who have even more money, a hanger-on. But so she wouldn't know what to make of him. I mean, King Wesley is polite. He's polite to a fault. I mean, when we see him later, he's like, yes, dear. Whatever you want, dear. Absolutely, my dear. And it's like, God, just like you're not even there. And she's drinking too much. Ellie is a Mrs. Robinson in the making, and she escapes Mrs. Robinson's fate because she's drinking, she's grabbing champagne off of the tray. And she says, "It's up to you now. I just want to be on a merry-go-round," meaning I want to be drunk 24/7. I just want to be in a whirl. And he's like, "Whatever you say, dear." Well, it'll suit him fine if she becomes an alcoholic in an upstairs bedroom. I think he's got his own plans, and she's not a big part of them. He wants the standing, he wants the connection to the father, he wants to fly helicopters, or whatever else he wants to do. It's not going to be a huge loss for him if his wife becomes an alienated alcoholic. And that's a shocking thing to say on days before their wedding. In love and in true love, any diminishment of the partner feels like a diminishment of you, period. And if it doesn't, then it's something else. Because in transactions, a diminishment of the other person is a diminishment of the other person. I mean, if I figure out a way, or someone figures out a way to sell you something that they bought for $20 and they sell it to you for $50, and they've made $30, and then you go down the street and see the same thing on sale for $20, well, you've been diminished by $30. That's capitalism. That's the point of capitalism. Somebody has to be diminished if somebody is going to be expanded, and that's what love is not supposed to be. So it should be more the case that if through no fault of yours you find out that your lover lost something, then you lost something too. And if you say that sounds like a you problem, then you're not in love and you're kind of a jerk. But you don't have to. Obviously, you can't experience a personal loss, every loss of everybody you know. Then you just get sort of bled dry. But if you claim that you're in a relationship where you're in love, and when the other person is diminished, you stand back, that's some other kind of relationship. And the wedding vow tries to work that in for richer and for poorer, in sickness and in health. I mean, this is what's unique about marriage, is it says, after this is your final transaction. Do you take this man as your lawfully wedded husband, lawfully wedded wife? I do. The reason that I do is so iconic is it's the moment that you move from the transactional to the spiritual, to the emotional, no longer the rational, no longer credit and debit. And of course, we also know that there's nothing magical about that with marriages. How would you explain a prenuptial? I mean, prenuptials are very unromantic and also sometimes seen as something you really should do. So if you're worth $10 million and you fall in love with somebody, with the checkout clerk at Sobeys, that's great. But the prenuptial is going to be awkward because it's going to defy what romance is supposed to be. You're going to say, "I love you with all my heart, and here's a diamond." But if it doesn't work out, I don't want you grabbing $5 million from me. So sign here, and if we get divorced, you're still a checkout clerk, and I'm still a millionaire. I mean, I really wonder if is he going to get a prenuptial. That was weird. I just heard myself talking to myself. Might be a sign that I should try and wrap this up. But what I'm going to do now is move to, I would say, arguably a parallel scene in The Graduate. And let me go to that. See if I can find it. Give me a minute. Even if I do know this movie shot by shot, it still takes time. Okay, I'm going to back up. That's where they actually start to resolve. Okay. Okay, so I want to show you the date from hell, and then I'll talk a little about the shot sequence, because the date from hell is going to end with a kiss. That it seems an impossible breach, and I want you to watch how this moves from, she doesn't even, the poor Elaine has no idea that she's caught up in a transactional moment with Benjamin and her mother. I mean, how could she know? And what a nightmare when you're caught up and being treated terribly and it had nothing to do with you. He is treating her the way her mother treated him, and he's being Mrs. Robinson right now. He is treating her like a thing. He's going to bring her to a strip club. He's going to, say, "Hey, why aren't you watching while these women strip?" And then when they get the special effect of the twirling, the whatever they call them, the pasties, I guess. He's like, "Wow, look at that! Can you do that?" That's like one of the, I don't know what to call that. It's more than, it's unbelievably insulting and well, flat out, horribly misogynistic, if that's how he really feels. But actually, he's being Mrs. Robinson and being like, how do you, these women are objects, and aren't you looking at them as objects? And this woman behind you is objectified. Do you know how to objectify yourself? Do you have any idea what your mother did to me? That's what he should be saying. And this is what happens instead.
Are you going to graduate school? Do you always drive like this?
Yes. Why don't you watch the show?
Benjamin, do you dislike me for some reason?
No. Why should I?
I don't know.
You're missing a great effect there. How do you like that? If you do it, I'm sorry. Be waiting. I'm sorry I took you in.
Where's the car?
I just want to tell you something.
I want to go home.
But can I just tell you this one thing?
What?
The whole idea, this date and everything, it was my parents' idea. They forced me into it.
Oh, it's very nice of you to tell me.
No, what I mean is that's why I've been acting this way. I'm not like this. I hate myself like this.
Listen, could you just stop crying, please?
No, I couldn't.
But could you try?
No.
I've had this feeling ever since I graduated. It's kind of compulsion that I have to be rude all the time. You know what I mean?
Okay. One thing to notice is it's another odd moment in the movie where you get a sense of the civil unrest, the counterculture, the people that are walking back, the different rock and roll music venues as there were. That's kind of what the '60s, especially in LA and in Berkeley, that was the scene. And all of a sudden he's acting like he's part of that scene. I don't even know how he knows anything about this scene, but he's not a part of it. And you just for a moment get a look at the longer hair, the smoking cigarettes, possibly pot, whatever is going on around them, and then into this sleazy bar, which is not the '60s. The bar seems, the strip club seems a holdover from the '50s. So that panning shot is full of a lot of information. Panning shots tend to accumulate information as they pan, and this is also called a. Sorry, I should call this a tracking shot. A panning shot is when the camera's still and goes left and goes right, and things are still going past it. A tracking shot, sometimes called a dolly shot, they used to have to build a track, and they still did for a while. And nowadays cameras are lighter, but the camera's actually going along parallel with them. So Nichols does lots of things with tracking shots. The movie opens with a tracking shot, which is very weird because it's moving with Benjamin, who's not moving at all. And then there's a point where the camera slows down and the people mover takes Benjamin out of the shot. So Nichols is really good at using the space of the shot. I mean, that's one thing a director has to work with is what's on screen gives the illusion of plenitude, that you feel like you're seeing everything that you need to see because it's what you're being shown. But every shot is much more not in it than it is in it. And good directors use that. Certainly horror movies. I mean, pop-outs or pop-ins, something flies into the frame, and those can be sort of cheap effects. Or they can be done in some kind of way that conveys psychological breakdown. But he goes in with his dark glasses, so he's trying to be invulnerable. One of the reactions we have to being coaxed into a vulnerable position and then slammed, which to some degree he is. I mean, he doesn't really know what the relationship with Mrs. Robinson is like. She says, "I'm very attracted to you." Well, what does that mean? As a kind of human self-pleasuring machine? I guess that's a kind of an attraction. She really ought to clarify. But at the same time, he can't possibly feel like she's in love with him or ever would be. And she does manipulate him by implying he's not just a virgin, but that he's inadequate. She's quite, she's really vicious. And that's why it's not surprising. Like when he says, "Sit down," that's almost the exact same tone as Mrs. Robinson saying, "Bring me my purse. For God's sake, Benjamin, don't you take Elaine out ever." I mean, she talks to him like he's a dog. And in this scene, he talks to Elaine like she's a dog. "Sit." And she does. And she's just, then she asks the same question that the father will ask him later. "Do you dislike me, Benjamin?" He's like, "No, why should I?" And indeed. And she says, "I don't know." And again, the lighting is brilliant here because when she says, "I don't know," the camera moves and the lighting falls and her face goes completely dark. We can't see her face. This is another German expressionist trick where in the moment where she admits her confusion and how she's just trying to get her bearings, we can't see her face. And he's not looking at her face and he's wearing dark glasses. And so he keeps that up. "Aren't you looking? Can you do that?" And then we get a shot counter shot. And this is where in a romance the shot counter shot is so important because it's close up of person A, close up of person B, and in a shot that leads to a kiss, this often will lead to both of them coming into the frame in close up. Now their first kiss is a medium long shot, and that sort of suits what this movie is struggling with. They trying to reinvent romance in the midst of transaction and this family dysfunction and predatory commodity culture driven like behavior, because Mrs. Robinson just treats him like a day at the spa, an afternoon at the spa. She should probably just go get her nails done and leave him alone. And then they're equally useless at making her feel better. If you notice, she's always wearing leopard skin, and that was deliberate on Nichols' part. Her in that scene where he first sees her living room looks like a jungle. It's like this gigantic houseplants that she looks like a tiger crouched in the jungle, covered in leopard skin. And I don't know if the word cougar comes from this movie, and I should check, because it seems entirely possible. Now we know that a cougar is a name for an older woman who wants to have flings with younger people. She's not looking to get married. And I'm not saying anything wrong. It's all about where is the other person. I mean, if an older woman meets someone younger, then you have that great song by Rod Stewart, Maggie, which also kind of looks at this like, I loved being with you, but I'm not really going anywhere. And the morning sun, when it's in your face, really shows your age, but that don't worry me none. And my eyes do everything. But you can begin to see why, even if it's an older woman offering sex to someone younger who is super curious and eager to experience sex, it still can be abusive, because the older person knows how confusing and engaging and inviting sex can be. And if they take advantage of that to get what they want when they have no intention of meeting that, and she knows that he's a virgin, he's never had a serious relationship, and she's counting on that. She knows that she can confuse him. That scene where he decides to stay after she said, "You're not good enough for Elaine," is hard to watch even now, all the times I've seen this movie. He's such a little boy, and she's a maternal figure. His own mother is kind of emotionally unavailable, intrusively present, emotionally unavailable. And I'm not saying it's strictly Oedipal. I'm not saying that he wants Mrs. Robinson because he quote unquote wants his mom. I don't think he does want his mom, but he seems to have not, being the empty suitcase, he doesn't seem to have figured out how to recalculate approaching a young woman his own age. It's so uncharted. It's like his parents assume they will pick out his wife for him too, in this case Elaine, and everyone but Mrs. Robinson is down with that. The scene where he says, "I'm going to marry Elaine," it's got a very funny scene and also ridiculous. The mother, that scream the mother gives, I still jump when I see that. It's very primal. They're all like animals, circling him like sharks. She's waiting in the jungle like a tiger. The father waits in the dark in his dorm room. His damn parents, they're hiding and pouncing constantly. They're treating their children like mice, like prey. Excuse me. And so when he sees her cry, he feels like who he actually is again, because all along he's been treating her like, I'm Mrs. Robinson and you're Benjamin. I'm Mrs. Robinson and you're Benjamin. Take it. How do you like it? Can you do that too? Can you strip just for our people's amusement? Because if you look at one of the scenes where Mrs. Robinson takes his shirt off, she does seem to see him as a boy toy, to use another. She enjoys unbuttoning his shirt, looking at his chest, as though he were a hired male stripper, for her enjoyment. And of course, the male stripper would be more fair in a way. If Mrs. Robinson hired someone, that person would be fully aware that they're hired, and they get compensated for agreeing to be objectified. That's not what Benjamin's done. So she is getting something for free in a transactional way, and she is taking advantage of him. And when he wants to talk to her, and it's not clear to me, ultimately what they would talk about, but the way she cuts him off, like, I don't think we have much to say to each other. What do you want to talk about? And he's like, I don't know. What do you want to talk about? She goes, art. And he goes, okay, you start. She goes, you start. I don't know anything about art. And then later in that same conversation, he says, what did you major in college? And she says, art. And that, I guess, in a series of amazing close-ups by Anne Bancroft, the actress who plays Mrs. Robinson, that's one of my favorites, because it's hard to feel sorry for Mrs. Robinson, and yet it's possible. That's shocking, and that's a tribute to Anne Bancroft. She both conveys the fact this is a destructive, kind of horrible woman who is really wrecking her daughter's life. She's wrecking Benjamin's life. She's wrecking everything around her because she hates herself in her life so much, and she's making everybody pay for it. And somehow Bancroft managed to also convey this wounded animal. She's not just an animal. She's a wounded animal. She has been ripped to the core. She is hollow. She's an alcoholic. She feels like her life is over. She hates everything except, it's just so weird that she could live. When I first saw this movie a million years ago, I was so surprised that she was trapping her daughter into a life that had destroyed her. And it took me a while to realize. Look at that scene where she comes in the room naked. You see it reflected in the portrait of her daughter. And then when he turns, we see her. And of course, she's still very physically attractive. She was only about the actress is only about 8 years older than Dustin Hoffman. Dustin Hoffman's 30 years old, and I think Anne Bancroft was 42 or 3. So biologically, she would have had to have him, or she would have had to have Elaine when she was 12 or something like that. So she's very young for the mother of a young woman in university. So, but it's believable that she's a very fit 4-year-old. But what's kind of cringeworthy, as you guys sometimes say, is it just seems so blatant that she's getting older and she still looks good, but of course Elaine is coming into the fullness of young womanhood and is just knocked down gorgeous in every way, and probably in a way that Mrs. Robinson was. And if you look at the mise-en-scène, which is the way everything in that room is set up, there seems to be a picture. It seems like Elaine has a picture of her mom underneath the portrait when her mom was Elaine's age. So you have such a complicated moment there. You have the young Mrs. Robinson, who is Elaine's age, in a black and white photo underneath the full-size portrait of who Elaine is like now, superimposed upon the mom's naked body when she's 40, trying to achieve feelings of her youth and dazzle a boy the age of her daughter, as though she were the age of her daughter. She's eclipsing her daughter, even optically, the way Mike Nichols films it. She blocks out the portrait of the daughter. And really, when she said, we have a new portrait of Elaine, would you like to see it? What she is saying, of course, is come upstairs and see me. I'm, as attractive as Elaine. And at that point, there's no reason to think that he would ever, even if they hadn't had the affair, would he have met Elaine? But she's almost acting that way, like, you could probably fall for Elaine because you're her age, but look at me first. And then now that you've done that, I don't. And when she first says in the bed, don't ever take Elaine out, that's why I was surprised when they dig up Carl Smith, because I thought she was partly saying, the fact that you fell for my seduction really does mean you won't be a good husband for Elaine, and my life sucks and I wrecked it, and I'm not going to let that happen to my daughter. So I was really kind of surprised the first time I saw the movie that that's exactly what you're doing to your daughter. You're telling Benjamin to stay away so that you can make sure that your daughter's trapped too. People who want to drag you into their hell as a way to make themselves feel better. They're not only dangerous people, but they're futile people, because all they're going to do is potentially wreck another life, and it will do nothing to help them. Well, not the most cheerful note to end on, and yet I feel I must. So let me see if I can say that the the reverse, not the reverse, the other side of the coin is that romance is falling in love is a crisis. If you remember that the original root word of crisis means both a point of truth and an opportunity. So a crisis is a crossroads. We tend to forget that now, and now crisis seems to only be negative. But we need crises. Crises are crossroads. They are opportunities to get further lost, and they're opportunities to find yourself. They're what Joyce called epiphanies, if you've heard me on that subject. They're terrifying moments where what you thought you understood about your life opens up, and in that moment, none of the maps you had used are making any sense. And either you double down on the mapping and get even more alienated from where you actually are, or you let the maps go. And like Luke Skywalker, when he pushes away the computer, listen to the Force, Luke. That's when he finally drops the missile into the one tiny place that can blow up the Death Star, an impossible task. So love does make what would in any other crossroad be impossible. In a flicker that you have to be ready for, it makes the impossible possible. Because really the impossible can also be read as I'm possible. It's actually spelled the same, just to add a contraction, separate the first two letters from the next. Okay, it's a nice parlor trick, philosophical parlor trick. All right, that sounds a little better, right? I can leave you with that. And I will see you, I will actually see you Monday night. So do work on your prompts if you can. It makes Monday night better. So if you can get some stills up. You've seen me analyze a couple scenes a little bit, although I'm going to get a little more into calling the shots, as I put it. Why a close-up, why a pull away, why a zoom in, why a zoom out. Nichols uses the zoom out a lot to give you the visual equivalent of feeling alienated and alone. And he tends to use the zoom in as moment of crisis. And so that's not true of every director. That's why directors have different styles, and why we can talk about a Hitchcock film and a Nichols film and so on. Okay, I'm going to